Okay, now we're on to session 4, and so this will be the last session of the day. Ideally, you would have taken a tea break before this. Now we're talking about more specifically identifying the key business factors, which is a step 2. Well, what's going on here is that the key business factors meetings helps us to create the master list of key business factors, but now you're needing to go and say, of the master list of key business factors, which ones are applicable to your particular item. So that's why this is in the 7-step item assessment process. And so in this case, it's saying use the OP to get the KBS, but then you're saying, is this going to make a difference in my assessment? And is it going to make a difference in my assessment for this particular item? We kind of have a little bit of disagreement as to what is the right number of KBS you want to have associated with the item. Sometimes we say 3 to 4. In the Baldrige process, they're saying 4 to 6. But in any case, it's not the entire 20 plus KBFs that you would tend to see for a particular applicant as being, you don't take all of them and say that they're all applicable to this item. You're looking for the small number, the 4 to 6, that would be most relevant to this particular company, because you want to review what those are and keep those in mind as you're doing your assessment of this particular item. So you're basically saying that for every item, go and do a re-review of the KBFs and remind yourself of at least the top few that will be most influential on the way you look at this item. So we again go back into a group work area. Most of what we want to have going on here is not going to be somebody at the front of the room lecturing. It's going to be the teams themselves going through the exercises, talking. It's going to be you both watching what's going on, walking from team to team, and looking for whether there's a need for any kind of coaching. As much as possible, try to make it so that your behavior is not one that is going to disrupt the other teams. So try to avoid, if you can, suddenly stopping the group, when you hear something from one team and telling everyone to stop what they're doing so you can tell them some other piece of information. As much as possible, these teams should be running fairly independently, and they should be given the ability to keep continuity of their own process without too much of interruption from the instructor. And then we say, okay, now that you have some idea what the criteria is asking for and what's key for this company, now you have enough information so that you can actually gain some intelligent viewpoint of what's in the application. So step 3, read the application. Okay, and again, it's keep in mind things, and this is where we're starting to use the ADLI, approach, deployment, learning, and integration, so that even as they read through the application, they're starting to keep a bit of a sensitivity for the words that are being given to them. So if an applicant says, we are thinking about doing this, or we just hired somebody to do this, then you might say, okay, well, now I've got an approach thing. But if it's really new, then there's probably not a lot of deployment. You might want to have that as a thought process, that if it seems to be an important approach, but you're not seeing it put in place, then that could be a problem. Part of what might come into this area too is that you may want to talk to the people in the room about some of the nuances of the assessment process, and one of those, just as a quick note, is that if someone says, here's our wonderful new approach, we've just put into place this wonderful new assessment, employee engagement assessment, I can give them concerns about it not being deployed, but it also puts a little bit of a expectation on me that I kind of want to look for what they have already been doing. So it's quite possible they already have a previous approach that they did well deploy, and now they're doing something else that's a better approach, and they're in the process of deployment. But you may sometimes need to have your people think about looking deeper beyond what maybe the application says, because it's that deep thought process that has you start to write down potential opportunities for reviewing things at site visit. Now, we call those site visit issues, that's fine, but that term issues sometimes means that it's a problem. What we're really trying to do is we're trying to get a list of what is it that we want to find out at the site that can give us better clarity, so that we understand whether what we're seeing is something worthy of making an observation. So that kind of thought process, it's what you have when you start reading the application itself, is you're reading for what's in it, and you're reading a little bit for what's not in it. You're looking for the things that you'd like to find more information on. Okay, and so this is where we are officially pointing out it's the ADLI. In this particular case, although it's one of these slides that has the single character on here, the intention is not for this particular slide to be one where you're looking for brainstorming. This is just saying, hey, we're now coming up to the ADLI process. It's mainly put in here as emphasis that ADLI lettering system is going to be an important thing. So it's just a push to get that ADLI thing into their minds. Very short time on that one. So this is where we go through and we do the descriptions of approach, deployment, and then learning and integration. So there's the reference about what approach is, and then we emphasize their understanding of approach by one of these slides here. We are looking for brainstorming now. So without deployment and approach is nothing more than one. In this case, you don't spend much time on this. Our official answer is good intentions. It's, gee, we want to do it, but we're not doing it. Okay, again, the slides are there to kind of create a little bit of interaction. Deployment, again, explanation about what that is, and then we do the reinforcement slide, only in this case we're using the fill in the blank piece. So deployment without a something approach is just an interesting something. Because we put the first and the last letters on there, kind of forces a more specific answer to what can otherwise be an extremely general question. And so it's a systematic approach. It's otherwise just an interesting anecdote. Okay. Then we blank that one out as we go on, and then we talk about learning and integration, which lead to results, and then learning, basically we're pushing on this, what you see in the graphic is the PDCA cycle. So it says that you're looking at things, you're learning from based upon what your results are, and you're making adjustments, and then you're seeing whether those adjustments have actually had an effect upon the results that you're looking for. So we're looking to see whether companies do that. Some companies will spend time in their application talking about their cycles of improvement. Some maybe not so much. Sometimes they may talk about that in one section of the application, and you may have to, in order to be able to assess this particular item, think over to what was learned in the other part of the application where they talk more specifically about their continuous improvement methodologies. So this is kind of a place where you might need to emphasize to the students that the expectation is that they assess things based upon the entire application, not just what's written into the particular item that they have in front of them. They do want to read through that item, but it can't be assessed independently. You have to think about the rest of what's in the application as well. And then integration, basic idea of the fact that the integration is the connectedness of things, how things work together to get a better outcome than they would independently. And there can be a lot of discussion about what you might expect to see in a company where you wanted to think about integration. Overall, in the ADLI area, I think that you do want to say that for the lower level companies, it's the A and the D that are the really important things. That's where they tend to have a lot of their problems is having good approaches and deploying whatever it is they're intending to do. When you get to the higher level companies, the idea of how quickly are you making it so that you're going from good to great, which is the learning stuff, and integration, which is how are you ensuring that you're efficiently using and connecting all of the resources that might be appropriate for gaining some kind of particular outcome. Those become more important for those higher level companies. So even as you're doing scoring, that thought process has to be in there that for some places you don't want to spend too much time on the L&I pieces of it if that's not the key deal for that company in its stage of maturity. But in any case, we're showing what each of those things would be, and then we ask the assessor over time to choose where they're going to want to spend their thought process when they actually get an application in hand. And then we just have the open picture about discussion about alignment and integration. In this case, this is a picture that kind of shows a relay race in which you have to have both people working together, and the baton is what's the way in which they get crossed together. In this case, it's just kind of a humorous cartoon. This might be considered to be an example of not so good integration because you're not necessarily giving a good product from one place to another. But there is certainly something in there that says that there is that this creates a time focus that at some point you want to make sure you get that particular thing through your process as quickly as possible. And then a more standard kind of picture about the integration activity of getting things aligned together, and then integrated is working together. And now this is where we're coming to the end of the day, and so we want to make sure that people are reading the relevant section of this, that we want them to be spending their time looking at the criteria in the application in front of them. So we want them to spend some time individually doing that, because that's the way they're going to do it in real life. Okay, in real life, this is a place you do it when you're not in a team. But then on top of that, we then give them some homework to do at the end of the day. And again, it's the writing down things based upon their reading. So you can ask them to do some of the reading inside of class if you have the appropriate amount of time, and then you'll take some of this other stuff off into the outside of the class homework activity. And so you'll see in this case we have a little picture of someone at a desk that says, yes, this is you individually actually doing something external to the program. And then the final slide on here is that at the end of each day, we're going to ask people to not necessarily summarize the day, but to have each person write down on a Post-it note 2 things that they got out of the day, particularly that were most important to them, and then get that information on the wall. It helps the student to think about things for themselves, summarize, and then it gives you some picture of what went well in the class and what didn't, because you're seeing what actually came through and was seen as most important. Okay, and then that's the end of day 1, so that's the end of session 4, and we thank the student, and we get on our way to the next day. And so the next portion of this is going to be reviewing day 2. Thanks.